Booknerds. Welcome to the Booknerds podcast. A wonderful session coming up because, this book that you see on your screen, it's called Tales from the Vedas and Upanishads. It has got so much in it that I can't even, even if we talk for half an hour, it won't do it justice, but we'll try our best. Of course, we have with us two very esteemed personalities here. We have with us Purnima Ramakrishnan and Rishabh C. Kothari. First of all, welcome to the Book Nerds podcast.
Thank you so much for having us, Rohan. It's our pleasure and honor to be here.
Same here, Rohan.
Good.
Thanks a lot for having us today on the show.
As I was talking about the book, of course, the cover is just super awesome. And the illustrator is Gayatri Pachpande, if I'm not wrong. And it is done so well. It is so contemporary as well. Before we go into dive deep into the podcast, I would like to tell everyone about, of course, the author and how this book, of course, the panelists as well. So Daaji, widely known as Daaji, Kamlesh Patel, is an original voice in an ancient tradition. His teachings arise from his personal experience on the path of heartfulness, and we'll be talking a lot about heartfulness today. Be rest assured. While reflecting his deep spirit of inquiry and respect for the world's great spiritual tradition and scientific advancements, Daaji practiced pharmacy in New York City for over 3 decades before being named as the successor in a century-old lineage of spiritual masters. So, and of course, we are joined by Purnima Ramakrishnan, who is a UN award-winning journalist and recipient of the Fellowship in Journalism by IRP, Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. She hosts the popular spiritual podcast. You are a podcaster as well, so you need to give me tips. So it's called Glow Heartfulness Webinars for Women. I need to check this out ASAP, and is a certified heartfulness meditation trainer. She's also the chief strategy officer and senior editor at World Moms Network, a Forbes top 100 website for women. We are, of course, Rishabh is stuck in a jam, but he has been so kind to kind of, still, come through. I'm so thankful to him for doing this. He's an entrepreneur. You can make out, right? We make things happen. You have to make things happen, and that's what he's doing right now. He's also a heartfulness meditation trainer by passion, and as CEO of CKC Fragrances, his craft is an interesting mix of science and creativity. This is incredible. I mean, we have never had this on the podcast. This is so interesting. He is widely read and traveled, and of course, he has benefited a lot from this heartfulness movement, which of course he propagates also in a huge manner. Thank you so much, both of you. I know the introduction went long, but this was required to set things in perspective and talk about Daaji first. I will request Purnima to go first, and then Rishabh can, of course, tell me more. I was not aware about his teachings and what he has kind of been propagating. First of all, what is the thinking about this behind this book, the inception? Of course, please tell us more, Purnima.
So Daaji has always wanted the great ancient Upanishads, Vedas, all sorts of Indian literature, which has been in it has been in since 5,000, 10,000 years ago, to be told and retold again and again, and to make them more relevant for today's children. If you probably remember, we used to have these books in our primary grade, like there were 4 cows which fought, and then there was a tiger which came in, and then towards the end of the story you'll have a line which said moral of the story, colon,
Yes.
united we stand, divided we fall. And
Right.
I was not impressed, you were not impressed. Who is even going to be wanting to stay united because of that caption? So Daji
Right.
always had this idea that we should bring back all of these ancient, rich things which is there in our Indian culture and tradition back to children of today. So
Right.
that was his original idea in the conception or inception of these books. And Upanishads, as you see, they are not stories which are action. Uh, No, today you have Marvel Endgame, and for children you have Harry Potter. You have, of course, for slightly older children, adolescents, you have Lord of the Rings. And if you see all of these stories, there is a lot of action packed. Is there one scene in the Marvel or in the Transformers where there is not something happening? But if you read
Right.
a story from the Upanishads, nothing is happening,
Yeah.
so to speak. And then you'll
Right.
have to actually sit down and think to understand what really did I read now, and why did I read now all
Yeah.
of this, and why is
Yeah.
it relevant to me as a now I'm a mother, but if I were a child, is it relevant to me as a school going girl or a uh, you know uh, so Daji always thought there is so much of wealth in it to actually use in today's times, and so I want to bring it to the world. Because if you look at his life per se, there is this, if you read about him on the internet, he
Yeah.
wanted to become a monk,
Yeah.
and he didn't become a monk. He went to New York. He was a successful pharmacist. He was a very successful businessman. He had a chain of he was a very very successful entrepreneur like Rishabh ji, and
Yeah.
he is now a spiritual leader, and he has balanced his spiritual and material life so wonderfully, so beautifully, just like you see in the story of Lopamudra and Agastya. So
Yes.
that's where Daji comes from. He says, like, everything which has been in the ancient times, if we try to harness it in today's times, it's going to be so useful for us, and he wants this to be shared with today's humanity.
Of course, you mentioned a very important story from the book, and I'll go into it in a bit, because that discusses the relevance of family, and it is so important. I mean, there can't be anything more important, perhaps. Maybe, but it's extremely important. Uh, Rishabh, these stories. I mean, you read them in a couple of hours. It's quite a fast read, to be honest. I mean, but to kind of marinate in it. I mean, I'm using a cooking analogy, but it is so it stays with you. You can't get away from it.
So I think it's a reflection of what the heartfulness practice is all about. So give you a little background, as you also mentioned that you were not even familiar with Daji or heartfulness.
Yeah.
So I think it's a more than a century old practice. It's a
Okay.
very simple practice of meditation.
Yeah.
And why heartfulness is because the practice revolves around the heart. It's about heartful living. It's about living in resonating with the values of your heart. I will
Right.
not go into great detail as far as the practice is concerned,
Yeah.
but the practice is extremely simple, it's extremely effective. And using your analogy, it is about practicing something for a very short period of time, giving it a few minutes a day, but the
Right.
effect or the importance of it stays with you for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So the way you said that, it's a quick read,
Yeah.
but the feeling or the value stays on. I think that is also the hallmark of the practice of heartfulness, where
Right.
we all, Purnima, me, all of us, and along with us, millions of people across the globe,
Yeah.
meditate for a few minutes, dedicate a few minutes of a day to
Yeah.
this very simple practice. But it
Right.
is extremely effective, and it works and stays with you for the rest of the day as well as the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Coming to the book, I think the whole idea with, of course, Purnima explained to you how this book is so different and yet so similar to other books of this genre, which Daji wanted to be packaged in a way which would be interesting to children.
Right.
Because the idea is that heartful living, or living with the values of the heart, is
Yeah.
something which ideally, if it starts at the youngest age possible, we
Right.
grow into a practice, we grow into a system of values
Yeah.
so that it becomes natural to us. So I think that was the whole idea behind this book, where we hopefully were trying to take our spiritual heritage and
Yeah.
package it or present it to children in a form which is both interesting and palatable to them.
Yeah.
Purnima, being a avid author herself, she has worked with Daji on this book also, would be
Yeah.
able to give far more greater insights. But I
Yeah.
think the eventually the idea was to come up with a book which would be of great not only relevance but also interest to our children, and they
Right.
pick up something from it which will stay with them.
Yeah. I wanted to quote from the book, in fact, and there's this wonderful part, and then I'll of course ask Purnima about how the publishing process as well, because it is not an easy thing to kind of put things down when somebody else is kind of talking about it, and then be organic. I mean, I wanted to ask her about this, but before that, uh, there's this part where I quote: the heartfulness meditation accelerates the purification of the coverings. After transcending these coverings, which is the journey of human evolution, our awareness expands to the fullest. I mean, quite profound words. A word about this, Rishabh, and then we'll go to Purnima. We have lost your audio, Rishabh.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was muted here.
Yeah, yeah,
So, so as I was saying, I think it's about the practice of heartfulness. And when we talk about expansion of consciousness, I think as we as human beings, we all have consciousness which can be expanded in various forms.
yeah,
As I mentioned earlier, it's not only about the practice, even when we are reading a book like this, it's about imbibing a set of values, it's about imbibing a set of learnings and imparting them in our lives. So I think I will not put the reading of the book or the practice of meditation or anything else in isolation. I think it's all a combined effort or effect which has on us. If we read a book and it sets us thinking, or it helps us kind of move towards a particular path, or
yeah.
sets up something in ticks off something in us which allows us to kind of expand our thought process, our consciousness itself. So it's a sum of or a whole lot of things which will
Yeah.
take us to our eventual journey. I think that's what
True.
it's referred to.
Yeah. And I think so. I mean, you're so right that if the book doesn't kind of is part of your evolution, I mean, what's the whole point? I mean, it has to do something to you. Arun G is asking what made you write these stories. So basically he wants to know why this book at this point of time, and how you went about kind of writing it, because it's as I talked before, like the process, because this is not like you are I don't know how it happened, but tell us more about the behind the scenes a little bit.
I think Purnima would be the right person to actually give some insight on that.
Cool, cool. Purnima, can you tell us more?
Yeah, so to add on to first, going back to add on to what Rishabh ji said, what he said was extremely very spot on. But to make it more, simpler, I mean, for children, I think this is from one of the stories which comes later on in the book. But if you see in the first few stories, like the second story was about these two birds, and
Yes.
I don't know, did you read these two birds story?
Yes,
The
yes.
bird
I've done it, and in
branch.
fact, I'll show you the illustration also. I will show everyone the illustration. It's beautiful. And Purnima can talk us through this. What is
Yeah,
happening here?
thank you, Gayatri. I know she's watching this show. So when you go back to, I mean, all of these stories are interconnected. You cannot take out one story in isolation, like Rishabh ji mentioned. All of these stories are interconnected within each other. If you read them in a totality, it makes a lot of sense to sit down and think about it.
Yeah.
And when you look at this story, like I'm not answering this question directly, which you asked, but I'm going to answer it eventually. So if you
Yeah.
look at this story between the two birds, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a spoiler alert if you've not purchased the book for the audience. So, this bird on the lower branch realizes that there was no bird on the higher branch. It is the
Yeah.
bird which is already in the higher branch. And
Yeah.
this story has been in a few Upanishads. It was first in the Keno Upanishad, it's also there in two other Upanishads. So, there was these rishis which came after the first Upanishad, who were so impressed by the story in the previous Upanishad that they went on to retell it again in the next Upanishad. If you actually think about it, it's that's
Right.
just an inference we make. So when you talk about these coverings, the bird in the lower branch had to let go of its coverings of sweet and bitterness, of distractions, of the thorns. And when all of these coverings are shed, it realizes that, it is the most peaceful one, it is the most beautiful one. So
Yeah.
that is one example. And another example I would like to quote, which is again from one of the same story, one of the stories from the same book, is you've heard
Yeah.
of. I mean, you must have read this story about the.
Yes, yes, I did.
Founder
I did.
said the
The
thunder's
interpretation, the one with the interpretations, right? Different
yeah,
interpretations.
interpretations. So
Yeah.
everybody had their own interpretations because they had their own coverings. One of
Yeah.
them was lacking compassion, another was
Yeah.
lacking something else, charity. So each of us have our own, if you want to translate it into the modern parlance or the modern lingo, we all
Yeah.
have our own, shortcomings, weakness, challenges. And when we can let go of these coverings, which basically means if you can find your solutions, if you can improve upon your weakness, if you can strengthen your strengths, and if you can become the best version of yourself,
Yeah.
then that's evolution of consciousness. Then
Yeah.
that's like transcending everything which is an obstacle to you.
Yeah.
So coverings is basically a very broad term,
Yeah.
but it's actually a very simple term.
Yeah. Great. So I think so. We have a question. Yash Kumar Ravindra Bunkar says that is asking, how do we understand Upanishads, Vedas, etc. Please answer my question. How do we understand? It's yeah. Rishabh, can you take this, please?
I think, you see, it's not about understanding, it's about experiencing. If you ask me, when we read these stories, I don't think we can. I mean, of course, there is a logic to it, or there is an understanding to it, which comes to us when we think from the mind. But I think what is very interesting or very important with these stories is not about trying to understand something per se, but to
Yes.
somehow imbibe a certain value which you kind of catch on to when you read it. And something very interesting, which I personally found, is when I read this book and when I reread it, there were a
Yeah.
lot of things where there were new angles which came to me, which
Right.
perhaps the first time does not come to you. See, some of
Oh
these
yes.
stories I was familiar with as a kid, and I
Yeah.
had a perspective about them. But today, when I read it as an adult, it's the very same story, but it's a very
Yeah.
different perspective. So
Yeah.
I think when these stories were written, they were written to convey a message or a learning. It is not
Right.
important whether the birds actually were sitting on the branches, were the birds talking to each other,
Right.
not talking to each
Yeah.
other. I don't think that is relevant. What is relevant is the message or the essence is conveyed. And I
Yeah.
think when we come across a book like this, we try to imbibe that message or the essence of that book. That is
Yeah.
what makes these books so fascinating and also relevant, hundreds of thousands. I mean, after millions of years after they have been written.
Yeah.
These are
Awesome.
timeless
Okay.
stories.
Yeah. I would like to go back to my question about the writing process because it is a unique writing process because this is the the content is coming from Daji and then Purnima is putting it down. So how does that work? Because I mean, even with translation, it's kind of tricky. Once you when you're writing, maybe translating something, the gist perhaps could be diluted. So how did you guys kind of find the right balance and so that everything is proper?
So yeah, so like as you know, the stories are from the Upanishads and Vedas, and Daji has his inference which he has penned down in the last chapter,
Yeah,
last para
yeah,
of each story, which says, "Let's talk about it." Those are
right,
his own words.
yeah,
So so he kind of explains what each story is about,
right,
and we capture that, and we have added that as
yeah.
the essence of the story.
Yeah. Great. I wanted to talk about this story, understanding God, because it's the biggest question. I mean, there can't be a bigger question. And here we have got, I'm quoting from here, well, our sense organs are the pran, eyes, ears, mind, and speech. They all need food to survive. Begin your introspection there from food. And then, of course, things go on. So, Rishabh, would you like to comment on this and kind of the relevance of this story?
Purnima, can you take it? I think I'm having some problem with my connection.
Yeah,
Oh, sure.
sure. So like beginning from the, this Maslow's pyramid also, right? Like our
Yeah.
basic needs have to be fulfilled to go
Yeah.
to the next level of needs. So let's
Right.
go from the basic needs, which is food. So we all need food to survive.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you what happened between Varuna and Brigu. I'm not
Yes.
telling you. I'm not going into the philosophy of it, which is
Right.
which is my understanding.
Yeah.
So these guys, they sit down and talk about, okay, how do we understand God? But what is actually God is what we have to figure out. First, we need to fulfill our basic needs, which begins with food,
Yeah.
and then they go from there one step at a time. And when they start meditating on each essence of the Maslow's pyramid, like today I'm using the word this because we have this word and it's scientifically proven, and you have
Yeah.
it in our modern language and all of us are familiar with it. So when you
Yeah.
meditate on each step of the pyramid,
Right.
um, you understand the relevance of it in your life, in your everyday life. And that is so important for your everyday sustenance. It gives you joy, it allows you to move on to the next step. So,
Yeah.
continuing with your basic needs, finally you come to your life breath, which is prana,
Yeah.
which is what it says. And then when you go beyond it, it's your mind which helps you understand God. But when you
Yeah.
want to translate all of this to children,
Yeah.
again, like, we need a balance for everything. You can't
Right.
overindulge in food, you can't overindulge in addictions, you can't
Yeah.
overindulge in activities. So understanding God is about finding a balance. It's more a principle. I mean, I'm not talking about religious beliefs.
Yeah.
Understanding God is more about a principle.
Yeah.
And to tell that to children is, I think, this is one of the best ways.
Yeah. Awesome. Rishabh, is the connection fine now? Great. So my next question is about the relevance of these stories, because it's actually the parents who
Hmm?
tend to kind of introduce books to their children. I mean, it's hard for children to kind of pick up stuff, so they need to be educated regarding this. And I request all the parents who are watching to kind of pick up a copy and experience it yourself. You won't regret. I have done it, and I plan on kind of sort of telling these stories in a very organic manner to my children, very casually, not like sit them down and tell them a story per se, but kind of put it in, like sprinkle it around. So that's how I tend to do it. But do read it with your children, of course. Why do parents need to pick this up? And I mean, both of you can take this question. And what is the relevance in contemporary times? In sort of, there is too much noise around.
Yeah, you said it. You said it. Why it's relevant is because there is too much noise around, and it's a great time of transition right now in the civilization, in the history of humanity. We have the melting of polar ice caps. We have climate change problems. We have a lot of challenging issues, bio warfare, nuclear. The world has not seen a greater threat than what it's
Yeah.
seeing now in all the fields. But at the same time, now is also the time when there is a lot of potential and scope for us to transcend all of these problems. But
Right.
at the same time, if you see during the times of Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata, Ramayana, they were
Yeah.
also changing times. They were also potentially drastically shifting times. Nowhere before Mahabharata all of the world came together to fight that big war, and that was also a great transition time. But what happened was, humanity had this ability to suddenly imbibe wisdom from the heart,
Yeah.
to move from that difficult time to the next beautiful time.
Yeah.
So I think we as a humanity now, I think we can do the same thing. Now we are almost facing extinction of everything, like
Mm.
the flora, fauna, everything. So
Right.
if you can maybe imbibe the wisdom which our ancients used to face their crisis and draw upon their reserves and move
Yeah.
to the next space where solutions emerge for these challenges, I think we can also do that. It may not be the same solutions because the problems are not the same, but the source of wisdom is the same. And when you can go back and use that ability of lateral thinking, use the ability of harnessing your inner reserves to manifest the solution. I think that quality is important. So these stories actually give you that quality. When the book launch was happening, Amish Tripathi said a very beautiful sentence: "These books make you think," and that's very
Wow.
vital in today's times. We don't think because we have so much to act upon that we don't
Yeah.
have that small space to sit down and think. So
True.
I think that's very important to
And
develop
yeah,
lateral thinking
and
and critical.
coming from him, he has written what was the book, Dharma recently, and that's kind of in the same territory. And so coming from him, we have to take him seriously. Who doesn't? So Rishabh, are you back with us? I hope the
Yeah, yeah,
jam
I'm
is not troubling you. Yeah. I wanted to, I had a follow-up question to you, because this age group of 8 to 14, I think this is the most distracted age group like ever, right now, because they have social media as well. They have peer pressure and whatnot. I mean, bullying and whatnot. All these issues. So it's the same question, but how important is it this age kind of to experience this wealth of information?
So I think to add on to the answer that Purnima gave previously about
Yeah,
why is the book important or relevant now, I think as parents, and me also being a young parent, I think it is also about exposing our children to our own heritage. I think the first and most important thing is, and I'm not being political over here, it's not a
yeah,
political statement, but it's
obviously,
also
yeah,
important that today we come from a rich cultural heritage, which for various reasons our own children are not exposed to.
right,
Uh, it has not always been accessible to us
yeah,
in a form which our children can easily digest.
yes,
While it is important to read and learn about so many other things that is happening the world over, I
yeah,
think there is a huge amount of sanctity and wisdom in our own ancient culture, in our own ancient traditions, whether it is the Vedas, whether it's the Puranas. So I
right,
think this book would be an attempt to bring this wisdom to our future generations in a relatively more palatable form, in a
right.
concise form, in a way that they can easily imbibe and assimilate.
Yeah.
So
In fact,
while
you're so right. You're so right, because this story about nature, that was so refreshing, and here it is, and just a
Hmm.
glimpse of it. I don't want to show too much, but it's about what is the importance of. I mean, of course, it's written here that, have you learned anything from nature? What and from whom? These questions, they tend to kind of uh, force you to look within, in a very, I mean, uh, tell us a little bit about the feedback that you have received, because I know it is very recent with the book, but what is the kind of feedback that you are getting regarding this book?
no, it has been fantastic. I think the feedback even before it was published, we had shared the stories with a large number of parents and students. Have our own two schools that we run. We have the
Yeah,
Lalaji Memorial Omega International School in
yeah,
Chennai,
yeah,
as well as the Heartfulness Learning Center that we run in
yeah,
Hyderabad. We had shared the
yeah,
stories with the children and
yeah,
received very positive feedback. And it is only post that this was sent in for formal publication. I think this has been a labor of love for Purnima. She has been at it for a very long time,
yeah,
writing, rewriting the stories, also taking feedback from children about what is working, what is not working, to make
right,
it as clear and easy for them. So,
right,
kudos to the kind of work she has been able to do for this book. And
yeah,
we hope that the audiences, the people are, see, for the mission and for the Heartfulness movement,
yeah,
books are not a commercial activity.
right,
When we publish like these, this is the intention is not to actually make money.
yeah,
Of course, when books are published, there is royalty to be earned, but
yeah,
every single rupee that is earned by Daji by any of his books,
Yeah.
actually are spent towards contributing towards the movement of
Okay.
heartfulness. So
Yeah.
this is not a commercial enterprise at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, people like Purnima and everyone else who has contributed to this book have done
Yeah.
so voluntarily as a
Yeah.
labor of love to
Wow.
these stories to the audience. I don't think there is, I mean, I know for sure there is no commercial interest at all as far
Yeah.
as these books are concerned. And we are
Yeah.
fortunate to have publishers like Westland and Red Panda who also, while of course it's a commercial enterprise, but they share that sense of values with us to
Yeah.
take this book to as many parents and as many children as possible.
Yeah.
So I think the feedback has been very nice, very good, and
Yeah.
our intention is to just, one very interesting thing about our Indian cultural references,
Yeah.
what we mentioned about Amish saying is that they make us think. See, there are when you read these stories, also there is uh, no ready-made spoon feeding of a value or a
Right.
moral that comes in
Yeah.
and says,
Yeah.
ABC, this is what you must think, this is what you must feel, this is what you must learn.
Yeah.
It's extremely layered,
Yeah.
and while it also helps in our evolution, it helps in the expansion of our consciousness. It is
Yeah.
also something which happens because we are thinking and acting ourselves. So
Right.
whether it's a child reading it or whether it's an adult reading it, they go through that experience. It's about
Yeah.
discovering the answers for yourself. It's the
Yeah.
thinking process and the learning process which you do
Yeah.
yourself. So
Truly, I
that is
mean,
what is
I've been
fascinating.
reading. Yeah. I've been reading a lot of children books, and this book gets it all right. I mean, there is no weak link in the book, to be honest. I'm not just saying it. I said it before the live session started, also. And again, recommending the book to everyone. Purnima, this is so right. I mean, you pitch this book to most publishers, they would say, "Hello, this is not going to sell," because this can be come out to be tardy. I mean, it could lead to kind of bordering boring. These things. Most people think like that. So tell us a bit about that. Process just before publishing. What was happening there?
Oh, okay. So with Westland, we had, I mean, with Amazon, Red Panda. I mean,
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
I'm using all the names because we went through this whole.
Shout
So
out to them. Shout out to them. They have made this happen. So they deserve the
yeah,
credit.
they were amazing. They were amazing. But the editorial process with Red Panda was so amazing. My editor, the editor with whom we worked from the Heartfulness Institute, she was such a charm, and I have no words to thank her. And
Yeah.
the whole editorial team have been so amazing with us. The illustrators, the designers. Um, I don't know what to call. I mean, it's not even the word teamwork doesn't come. They owned it. They made it happen.
Wow.
Like Rishabji said, they shared our values, and they shared Daji's values, and we had such a beautiful time. And I hope we can repeat this whole process once again. And
It
of
will
course, with
happen.
Daji, it's always a blessing to work with him, and
Yeah.
it's been an amazing journey.
Yeah. Great. So, of course, I wanted to show the book cover once again. I suppose the book is available at most bookstores across the country. Anybody can pick it up from those independent bookstores. Is it available there or just Amazon?
Yes, yes, yes. No, no, book is available across bookstores all over the country, as
Okay.
well as, of course, online today, Amazon, Flipkart, or all the online portals. The book is available, and we are fortunate to have publishers like Westland who have the reach and the cloud to be able to ensure that the book is available. As I said,
Yeah.
for us, it is a labor of love. It is not a commercial enterprise. And organizations like Westland make it possible for us to take this book to every corner of the country.
Yeah, and also I know it'll be very tough. I really wanted to put you on the spot. Let's see what happens. I wanted to ask you the kind of story which has moved you the most. I mean, let's put it that way. Which has moved you the most or has inspired you the most? Because I have one, so I just wanted to know perhaps if you have one. Purnima, it's the toughest question for you, but if you have one, do let us know.
So all of them, but
Yeah.
like I mentioned, the two birds, and of course
Yeah.
Agastya and Lopamudra. So I
Yes.
think those two are the stories which are like the sum and essence for me. But
Yeah.
yeah, two birds.
Oh yeah, for me too. I'm not copying you, but the dazzling bird on the tree is my favorite
You
because it
can
is
copy
so.
me. If it's for a good purpose, you can copy me.
Yes, I mean it's so. I mean this at this age, sort of, it's so existential. Also at the same time, it is ridiculous. I was like questioning a lot of things. So Rishabh, any story of
I,
yeah,
I would also go with the same story. But you know what has been interesting for me that I
yeah,
have shared this with I mean, my daughter is already in college. My son is too cool to read these books, especially illustrated books, because this is for children. But
oh
it has been
yes,
interesting dinner table conversation
yeah,
uh, to discuss these stories, and also
yeah,
with my nephews and nieces
yeah,
when we started talking about this. Which interestingly, my son is a voracious reader, and
okay,
he would not admit it, but then he actually went around to read one of the stories, and then
yeah,
he eventually read all of them. So I feel
wonderful,
each story comes with a very
yeah,
interesting uh, positioning, which
yeah,
I found it very, very unique and very, very inspiring.
true,
It actually
true.
makes you think, and I think at times I feel by calling it a children's book, we do the book a disservice, because today I think
I
it
know,
is far more relevant to adults, and
yeah,
today far more interesting to adults
yeah.
than for children themselves.
I totally understand what you're saying because I was like, okay, why didn't I know most of these stories? So I'm so thankful to all of you and all of the great people at Westland who have done this wonderful job. I'm looking forward to reading more of these stories, and I wish that these stories are put in the curriculum. I'm just hoping. I suppose you guys must be trying to do that. So yeah, is that one of the things that you are trying to kind of push through?
Why not? See, idea is, see, it's not again about examining children or making them
Yeah,
unidimensional stories.
yeah,
As I said,
yeah,
the idea is to one is to make them think, and the other is
yeah,
to inspire them with these
yeah,
stories. And if
yeah.
they evolve with them, their ideas and their thoughts evolve with them, I think that itself would, I mean, we would accomplish what we set out to do. Because hopefully, these stories are the beginning
Yeah.
of a journey for children. No, it's not a destination.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you. You were saying something. I was
No,
about to conclude.
I think if we can speak to the hearts of the children, if anything
Yes.
we say reaches their hearts, then I think our job is done. Whether it's in the curriculum or the dinner
Yes.
table, or
Yes.
just sitting and talking about
Yeah.
it. So Daji's attempt was to speak to the hearts of the children. It should reach
Yeah.
their hearts. So I think that's what he wanted to do with all of this.
Well, I am an adult, but I am also a child at heart. So it reached my heart. Thank you so much for being on the Booknerds podcast. Okay, all the readers just go on Amazon or a bookstore near you, buy a copy, give your review there. If you like something, just say it there, and or if you dislike something, also it's totally fine. You can mention it, and of course, in the coming editions, that can be improved or evolved. Thank you so much, both of you. It has been such a pleasure, a great weekend for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rohan. Thank you so much.